In a small, peaceful village surrounded by rolling green hills, there lived a cheerful and curious little girl named Lily. She was 8 years old with bright blue eyes that sparkled like the summer sky and a smile that could light up even the gloomiest of days. Lily lived with her parents in a cozy cottage at the edge of the village. Her father was a carpenter, and her mother tended to their small garden, where flowers of every color bloomed in abundance. Lily's days were filled with wonder. She loved exploring the meadows, chasing butterflies, and collecting wildflowers. But there was one thing she longed for more than anything: a friend. Someone who would always be by her side. Someone who would share her adventures and secrets. One rainy afternoon, as Lily was walking home from school, she heard a faint meow coming from a bush near the road. Curious, she crouched down and peered into the leaves. There, shivering and soaked, was a tiny gray kitten with bright green eyes. Its fur was matted and it looked as though it hadn't eaten in days. Lily's heart melted. She carefully picked up the kitten and cradled it in her arms. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered. "I'll take care of you." When she brought the kitten home, her parents were hesitant at first. "Lily, taking care of a pet is a big responsibility," her mother said. But Lily promised she would feed it, clean it, and love it with all her heart. Seeing the determination in her daughter's eyes, her parents finally agreed. Lily named the kitten Misty because its gray fur reminded her of the morning fog that rolled over the hills. From that day on, Misty became Lily's constant companion. They played together in the garden, napped under the old oak tree, and shared secrets that only the two of them knew. As the days turned into weeks, Misty grew stronger and more playful. She would curl up on Lily's lap while she read her favorite books or follow her around the house like a shadow. Lily's laughter filled the cottage, and her parents couldn't help but smile at the bond between their daughter and the little cat. But one day something unexpected happened. Lily began to feel unusually tired. At first her parents thought it was just a passing cold, but as the days went by, her condition worsened. She no longer had the energy to play with Misty or explore the meadows. Her once bright eyes grew dull and her laughter faded. Her parents took her to the village doctor, who examined her carefully. His face grew serious as he delivered the news. Lily had a rare illness, one that even the best doctors in the city might not be able to cure. Lily's parents were devastated. They tried everything: herbs, prayers, and even traveling to distant towns for treatments. But nothing worked. Lily grew weaker with each passing day. Misty, sensing something was wrong, stayed by her side, purring softly, as if trying to comfort her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lily called her parents to her bedside. "I'm scared," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I'm also happy. I had the best family and the best friend in Misty. Promise me you'll take care of her." Her parents nodded, tears streaming down their faces. Lily smiled weakly and closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed, and then she was gone. The cottage fell silent, save for the soft meow of Misty, who nuzzled against Lily's hand, as if trying to wake her. The days that followed Lily's passing were heavy with grief. The cottage, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and empty. Lily's parents moved through their days like shadows, their hearts weighed down by the loss of their beloved daughter. The garden, which Lily had loved so much, began to wilt as if mourning her absence. Misty, too, felt the void left by Lily. She wandered through the house, meowing softly, searching for her best friend. She would sit by Lily's bed, staring at the empty space where she used to sleep, her green eyes filled with confusion and sadness. At night, she would curl up on Lily's pillow, as if hoping to feel her presence again. Lily's father, though consumed by his own sorrow, noticed Misty's distress. One evening he sat down beside the cat and gently stroked her fur. "I miss her too," he said, his voice breaking. "But we have to be strong, Misty." For her, Misty looked up at him, her eyes wide and trusting. It was as if she understood his words, as if she knew that they were both carrying the same pain. As the weeks passed, Misty began to adapt to life without Lily. She would sit by the window, watching the birds and butterflies just as she and Lily used to do. Sometimes she would venture into the garden, chasing after leaves that danced in the wind. But there was always a sense of longing in her movements, as if she were waiting for something or someone. One day, as Misty was exploring the garden, she noticed a small patch of wildflowers growing near the fence. They were the same kind of flowers Lily used to pick and weave into crowns. Misty approached the flowers cautiously, sniffing at them. Then, as if struck by a sudden idea, she plucked one of the flowers with her teeth and carried it back to the cottage. Lily's mother was in the kitchen when Misty trotted in, the flower still in her mouth. She dropped it at her feet and looked up at her, meowing softly. Lily's mother picked up the flower, her eyes filling with tears. "Thank you, Misty," she whispered. "It's just like Lily used to do." From that day on, Misty began bringing small gifts to Lily's parents, a feather, a shiny pebble, or a leaf. It was her way of comforting them, of reminding them that even though Lily was gone, her spirit lived on in the little things she had loved. But Misty's journey was far from over. One night, as she lay curled up on Lily's pillow, she had a strange dream. In the dream, Lily was standing in a sunlit meadow, surrounded by flowers and butterflies. She looked healthy and happy, just as she had before she fell ill. She smiled at Misty and said, "Don't be sad, my friend. I'm always with you." When Misty woke up, she felt a strange sense of peace. She knew that Lily was watching over her, and that gave her the strength to keep going. One crisp autumn morning, Misty woke up with a strange feeling in her heart. The dream of Lily in the meadow had stayed with her, and she felt an inexplicable pull to venture beyond the cottage and the garden. It was as if Lily's voice was calling her, urging her to explore the world they had once dreamed of discovering together. Misty padded over to Lily's parents, who were sitting quietly at the kitchen table. She rubbed against their legs, purring softly as if to say goodbye. Lily's mother looked down at her and smiled faintly. "Where are you off to, little one?" she asked, scratching Misty behind the ears. Misty meowed in response, then turned and trotted toward the door. She paused for a moment, glancing back at Lily's parents one last time before slipping outside. The village was just waking up, and the streets were quiet. Misty wandered through the cobblestone paths, her nose twitching at the unfamiliar scents. She passed the bakery, where the smell of fresh bread wafted through the air, and the blacksmith's forge, where the sound of hammering echoed. But Misty didn't stop. She had a destination in mind, though she wasn't quite sure what it was yet. As she reached the edge of the village, Misty hesitated. Beyond the last house stretched a vast forest, its trees tall and imposing. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Misty had never ventured this far before, but something inside her urged her to keep going. She took a deep breath and stepped into the forest. The air was cooler here, and the sounds of the village faded away, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the chirping of birds. Misty moved cautiously, her ears twitching at every sound. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she trusted her instincts. Hours passed, and the forest seemed to stretch on forever. Misty's paws grew tired and her stomach rumbled with hunger. She stopped by a small stream to drink, the cool water refreshing her. As she lapped at the water, she noticed a butterfly fluttering nearby. It was the same kind of butterfly Lily used to chase in the garden. Misty watched it for a moment, a pang of sadness tugging at her heart. But then something extraordinary happened. The butterfly landed on Misty's nose, its delicate wings brushing against her fur. For a moment, Misty felt as if Lily were there with her, laughing and reaching out to touch the butterfly. The feeling gave her renewed strength. Misty continued her journey, following the stream deeper into the forest. As the sun began to set, she came across a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an old, gnarled tree, its branches twisted and covered in moss. At the base of the tree was a hollow, just big enough for Misty to curl up inside. Exhausted, Misty crawled into the hollow and closed her eyes. As she drifted off to sleep, she thought she heard Lily's voice again, whispering, "You're doing great, Misty. Keep going." The next morning, Misty woke up to the sound of birds chirping. The forest was alive with activity, and the sunlight streaming through the trees filled the clearing with a golden glow. Misty stretched and stepped out of the hollow, feeling refreshed and ready to continue her journey. As she made her way through the forest, she noticed something unusual, a faint trail of smoke rising in the distance. Curious, Misty followed the smoke until she came upon a small rustic cabin nestled among the trees. Outside the cabin, an elderly woman was tending to a small fire, stirring a pot of something that smelled delicious. The woman looked up as Misty approached, her eyes widening in surprise. "Well, hello there, little one," she said, her voice warm and gentle. "What brings you so far into the forest?" Misty meowed softly, her tail swishing nervously. The woman smiled and knelt down, holding out her hand. "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you." Misty hesitated for a moment before stepping closer, allowing the woman to stroke her fur. The woman's touch was kind and reassuring, and Misty felt a sense of comfort she hadn't felt since Lily's passing. "You look like you've been through quite an adventure," the woman said, examining Misty's slightly matted fur and tired eyes. "Come inside and I'll get you something to eat." Misty followed the woman into the cabin, which was cozy and filled with the scent of herbs and wood smoke. The woman poured some milk into a small bowl and placed it on the floor. Misty lapped it up eagerly, her hunger finally satisfied. As Misty ate, the woman sat down in a rocking chair and watched her with a thoughtful expression. "You're not just any ordinary cat, are you?" she said softly. "I can see it in your eyes. You've lost someone dear to you." Misty looked up at the woman, her green eyes filled with sadness. The woman nodded as if understanding. "I've lived in this forest for many years, and I've learned to listen to its whispers. The forest has a way of guiding those who are lost. Perhaps it brought you here for a reason." The woman stood up and walked over to a shelf filled with jars of herbs and dried flowers. She picked up a small, intricately carved wooden box and brought it back to Misty. "This box belonged to my daughter," she said, her voice tinged with sorrow. "She passed away many years ago, but I've kept it as a reminder of her. Inside is a special charm, a symbol of love and protection. I think it's meant for you." She opened the box and took out a small silver pendant shaped like a butterfly. She gently tied it around Misty's neck with a piece of ribbon. "This will guide you on your journey and keep you safe. Remember, even when we lose those we love, their love never truly leaves us." Misty looked down at the pendant, feeling its warmth against her fur. She meowed softly as if to thank the woman. The woman smiled and patted Misty's head. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need, but I have a feeling your journey isn't over yet. Trust your instincts, little one. They will lead you where you need to go." Misty spent the rest of the day resting in the cabin, her strength slowly returning. As the sun began to set, she knew it was time to move on. She nuzzled the woman's hand one last time before stepping out into the forest, the pendant glinting in the fading light. The woman stood in the doorway, watching as Misty disappeared into the trees. "Good luck, little one," she whispered. "May the forest guide you." Misty ventured deeper into the forest, the silver butterfly pendant glowing faintly in the moonlight. The forest seemed quieter now, as if holding its breath. The trees loomed taller, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out most of the sky. Misty's paws patted softly on the moss-covered ground, and her senses were on high alert. As she walked, the air grew colder, and a distant rumble of thunder echoed through the trees. Misty's ears twitched, and she quickened her pace. She knew a storm was coming, and she needed to find shelter. The first drops of rain began to fall, cold and heavy. Misty darted under a large bush, but the leaves provided little protection. The rain grew heavier, and the wind howled through the trees, bending their branches and sending leaves swirling through the air. Lightning flashed, illuminating the forest in brief, blinding bursts. Misty knew she couldn't stay where she was. She pushed forward, her fur soaked and clinging to her body. The ground beneath her paws grew muddy, making it difficult to walk. Just as she was beginning to lose hope, she spotted a faint light in the distance. Summoning the last of her strength, Misty ran toward the light. As she got closer, she saw that it was coming from a small, weathered barn nestled in a clearing. The door was slightly ajar, and Misty slipped inside, shaking the rain from her fur. The barn was warm and dry, filled with the scent of hay and wood. A single lantern hung from a beam, casting a soft glow over the space. Misty looked around and noticed a pile of hay in one corner. She curled up on it, grateful for the shelter. As she rested, she heard a soft rustling sound. Misty's ears perked up, and she turned to see a small mouse peeking out from behind a stack of crates. The mouse stared at her with wide, curious eyes, but didn't seem afraid. Misty meowed softly, her tone gentle. The mouse hesitated for a moment before scurrying over to her. It placed a small piece of bread at her paws and squeaked as if offering her food. Misty blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected kindness from a creature she might have once considered prey. She nudged the bread with her nose, then looked at the mouse and purred softly, a sign of gratitude. The mouse squeaked again and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Misty alone with her thoughts. She ate the bread slowly, savoring every bite. The storm outside raged on, but inside the barn, Misty felt safe. As she drifted off to sleep, she thought about the mouse and the elderly woman in the cabin. Both had shown her kindness when she needed it most. It reminded her of Lily's words in her dream. "Don't be sad, my friend. I'm always with you." Misty realized that even in the darkest moments there was always a glimmer of light, a kind stranger, a small act of generosity, or a memory of love. She closed her eyes, the butterfly pendant resting against her chest, and slept peacefully. When Misty woke the next morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight streamed through the cracks in the barn walls, and the air was fresh and crisp. Misty stretched and shook the hay from her fur, feeling renewed and ready to continue her journey. She stepped outside and was greeted by a breathtaking sight. The forest opened up to reveal a towering mountain in the distance, its peak shrouded in mist. The mountain seemed to call to her, as if it held the answers she had been searching for. Misty set off toward the mountain, her paws carrying her steadily over the damp earth. The forest gradually thinned, giving way to rocky terrain and sparse vegetation. The climb was steep and challenging, but Misty pressed on, driven by an unshakable determination. As she climbed higher, the air grew thinner, and the temperature dropped. Misty's breath came in short puffs, and her muscles ached, but she refused to give up. She thought of Lily, her laughter, her kindness, and the love they had shared. That love gave her strength. After hours of climbing, Misty reached a plateau near the mountain's peak. The view was breathtaking. She could see the entire forest stretching out below, the village a tiny speck in the distance. The sky was a brilliant blue, and the sun bathed everything in a golden light. But Misty's attention was drawn to something else. A small, crystal-clear pool of water nestled among the rocks. The water sparkled like diamonds, and in its center stood a single delicate flower. It was unlike anything Misty had ever seen, its petals a shimmering silver that seemed to glow with an inner light. Misty approached the pool cautiously, her reflection rippling in the water. As she gazed at the flower, she felt a strange sense of peace. It was as if the flower held a piece of Lily's spirit, a reminder that love never truly fades. But then a voice broke the silence, a soft, melodic voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Misty," the voice said, "you have come far, guided by love and loyalty. But now you must make a choice." Misty looked around, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she meowed, her voice trembling. The voice continued, gentle yet firm. "I am the spirit of this mountain, a guardian of those who seek answers. You have proven your courage and your devotion, but the path ahead is not an easy one. You can return to the life you knew, carrying the memories of Lily in your heart. Or you can take the flower and bring it to the village, where it will bloom and bring healing to those who grieve. But know this, if you choose the flower, you will not be able to return to this place." Misty stared at the flower, her mind racing. The thought of returning to the village and bringing hope to others was tempting, but it would mean leaving behind the mountain and the connection she felt to Lily here. She thought of Lily's parents, their faces etched with sorrow. She thought of the elderly woman in the forest and the kindness she had shown. She thought of the mouse in the barn, who had shared its food without hesitation. Finally, Misty made her decision. She carefully plucked the flower from the pool, holding it gently in her mouth. The petals felt warm against her tongue, and a sense of purpose filled her heart. The mountain spirit's voice spoke again, softer this time. "You have chosen wisely, little one. Go now, and may your journey bring light to those who need it most." Misty turned and began the descent, the flower cradled carefully in her mouth. The path was steep and treacherous, but she moved with determination, her heart filled with hope. Misty's journey back to the village was long and arduous. The mountain's rugged terrain tested her strength, and the weight of the flower in her mouth made every step a challenge. But she pressed on, driven by the thought of bringing hope and healing to those she loved. As she neared the edge of the forest, the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the landscape. Misty's paws were sore, and her body ached, but she didn't stop. She could see the village in the distance, its lights twinkling like stars. When she finally reached the cottage, it was dark and quiet. Lily's parents were sitting by the fireplace, their faces drawn with grief. They hadn't smiled in weeks, and the weight of their loss hung heavy in the air. Misty pushed open the door with her paw and stepped inside, the flower still clutched in her mouth. Lily's mother looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Misty?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're back." Misty walked over to her and gently placed the flower at her feet. The silver petals glowed softly, filling the room with a warm, comforting light. Lily's mother picked up the flower, her hands shaking. What is this?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Misty meowed softly, her green eyes filled with love and reassurance. Lily's father knelt beside his wife, his gaze fixed on the flower. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice choked with emotion. It's like a piece of Lily." As they held the flower, something extraordinary happened. The petals began to shimmer even brighter, and a soft, melodic hum filled the room. The air seemed to vibrate with energy, and for a moment it felt as if Lily were there with them, her laughter echoing in their hearts. The flower's light spread throughout the cottage, touching every corner and filling it with warmth. The wilted plants in the garden outside began to perk up, their leaves turning green and vibrant once more. The villagers, drawn by the strange light, gathered outside the cottage, their faces filled with awe. Lily's parents stepped outside, the flower still glowing in their hands. The villagers watched in silence as the light spread through the village, touching every home and every heart. It was as if the flower's magic was healing not just the land, but the people as well. Misty sat on the doorstep watching as the village came alive with hope and joy. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had brought light to those who needed it most. Lily's mother knelt beside Misty and gently stroked her fur. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You've given us a gift we can never repay." Misty purred softly, nuzzling against her hand. She knew that her journey had come to an end, but it was only the beginning of a new chapter for the village and for Lily's memory. The flower was planted in the garden, where it bloomed year after year, its silver petals a symbol of love, hope, and the unbreakable bond between a young girl and her faithful friend. Misty stayed by the flower's side, watching over it and the village, a guardian of the light she had brought back from the mountain. And though Lily was gone, her spirit lived on in the flower, in the hearts of her parents, and in the love of a little cat who had never stopped believing in miracles.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.